All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And on this edition of the 300 pounds of sports knowledge podcast, I have the privilege of being joined by the one and only Mark Jenkins, who looks like he has set up his new man cave and he is ready to go. Mark, how's all things going, man?
Things going good, Will. How about yourself, man?
Listen, I got zero complaints. And when this topic came across my mind, you were the first and only person that I wanted to talk about it with. And you and I have, talked behind the scenes about this a couple of times. And now it's time to bring it to the public's light. And what we are going to be talking about right now is ESPN's hold over sports coverage. And it's hard to believe, okay, because it was just 46 years ago that ESPN was in the infant stages of becoming a 24-hour network source for sports coverage. Now, in the early days, ESPN was really pining for sports coverage as they went to the ends of the earth to find programming, and it programming to the point that if you watched it now, you would ask yourself, what in the world were they doing on there? Okay. But before the end of ESPN's first decade of business, they were booming. Okay. And especially due to their coverage of college basketball, among other things. Sports Center became sacrilege for so many sports junkies out there as they tune in to listen to the likes of Chris Berman, Stuart Scott, and Rich Eisen, just to name a few. Okay. But somewhere along the line, ESPN just simply jumped the shark. I mean, Disney is now a parent company of ESPN, and their sports production and coverage, in my opinion, is not what it once was. You look at Sports Center itself, this was the marquee show, in my opinion, for ESPN, the marquee of its programming. Sports Center is a shell of what it was. To me, ESPN's daytime programming is nothing more than so-called opinionated people giving their thoughts about sports. And I feel like with ESPN right now, it's to the point that the dumber the statement you make, the more airtime that you're going to receive. I mean, ESPN has let so many talented journalists over the years go because they feel like they can put anyone in front of a camera and they'll be okay. Mark, man, where do we start with this one?
Oh man, this one right here, we're gonna have some fun with for sure because I've got so many different kind of views and thoughts about this, and kind of where I want to jump start it is, the main thing that you said is Disney, and once Disney got involved, things became different. And, as anything in business, the bigger the company that absorbs the smaller company, the more that smaller company is eventually going to have to adapt to the ways of that larger company. And that's exactly what we're seeing on the grand scheme of things when it comes to what ESPN currently is provided now. Think about this. You mentioned when you talk about the back in the days when they first started, they were playing some of the most obscure things, which is what they now save for like the Ocho Day that they do, like for dodgeball.
Hmm.
So basically, like they started there, and then they really built their backbone, so to speak, on college sports.
Right.
Like really early Big East games, basketball games were like a big thing on ESPN.
Hmm.
And it's funny because what it was previously was exactly what the acronym of the name is. Many people don't know this, but it stands for Essential Sports Programming Network. And it used to be essential. Now it's kind of like laissez-faire. You can kind of I go days, weeks without watching it at times because it's so watered down. And that's Disney, the parent company, being in control of everything and basically having ESPN now in their image instead of what ESPN used to be. It's no different than let's look at another major company they took over. They took over Star Wars, kind of like around the same time. And when they took over Star Wars, you started seeing Disney putting their touches on certain things to make things a little bit more family friendly, so to speak, because at the end of the day, it's business. They're looking to make more money. They're
Hmm.
not really worried about alienating their target audience, so to speak, because they
Right.
feel they can still drag a certain amount of that population along with the movement that they are so-called think they're doing for good.
Hmm.
But what they're doing is watering down the product while also trying to do that. And if you think about it, with anything in business, when there's always that bigger corporation, especially when it's family friendly, like we all know the mouse is, they're going to water stuff down. And that's exactly what we're getting. You mentioned one thing, and I want to hit on this topic real quick about the daytime programming. So there was a golden age in daytime programming for ESPN, and this is even after Disney had got involved with the company, had purchased ESPN, but it was still in the kind of infant stages of that. So they really didn't have a chance to put their stamp on things, so to speak. But the daytime programming used to actually be quality opinionated people
Right.
who were, 20-year, 25-year veterans at their respective newspapers.
Right.
So it was people who had been around the block, seen everything that you needed to see, and really had them giving their opinion, and it was quality. You think about PTI, one of the few shows that's still left. If I think maybe the only show from that era that I'm talking about of the
Right.
quality programming during the daytime. These are guys that been on the job for 30, 40 years, Kornheiser, in his in his perspective. So basically what I'm saying is now they're basically throwing, to your point, anybody on there who's going to have the hottest take of the day. And it doesn't matter if it's factual or if it's ridiculous or if it's a little bit of, I'm not even going to say the word, but, tomfoolery, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if it's that kind of stuff, as long as it's going to get 1,000 likes in the first minute is posted, or it's
Yeah.
going to get 1 million views, or whatever that number is that they need to keep the algorithm going, how they need to keep going. That's what it's all about right now. It's not about bringing the meat and potatoes, so to speak, anymore. It's about who can get the most views, who can get the most likes, reactions, things like that.
Yeah, listen, I mean, they have destroyed the quality programming. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I can tell you, once upon a time, NFL primetime on Sunday evenings was a staple for me. I mean, listening to Tom Jackson and Chris Berman, and it's like they kept it going now, I think, on ESPN Plus, and it's Chris Berman and Booger McFarland. It's not the same, and I understand Tom Jackson's not going to be there forever, but the thing was that was a staple. Okay, after the 7 o'clock, after the 4 o'clock games are over, around 7 o'clock, and in those days, ESPN had Sunday Night Football, so of course it was a perfect segue for them into their Sunday night, coverage. And it's like I was one of those where I enjoyed listening to the late Mike Patrick and Joe Theismann and Paul McGuire, call those games. I was fine with it. I think about ESPN's coverage for baseball. Baseball Tonight as a program is not what it once was. Okay, Baseball Tonight, in my opinion, was once upon a time their flagship. And I think even the Sunday night coverage, the Sunday night baseball game used to be a marquee event for ESPN. And now it's just like, oh, okay, we're showing a Sunday night game. And it's like, like you used to get up to watch a Sunday night game, and it was like it was still, even like this time of the year, when football started, it was like, okay, you still look forward to the Sunday night game. It's like all of these sports shows that they have for the most part on ESPN. There's really no former baseball players on there. All of their analysts, if you will, that are ex-athletes, they're either football players or basketball players. And I just feel like, the people behind the scenes who are not sports people, they're TV people, they're just looking at the numbers and they're just looking at it and saying, well, you know what? Football and basketball are like the two top sports in the country, and let's go for that. Okay, that's one way to look at it, but at the same time, You can't sit up there and call yourself the worldwide leader if you're not, properly investing time into covering those other sports. And for me, their football and basketball coverage, stinks from the standpoint that you look at the NFL, the only teams they really talk about, they talk about the Dallas Cowboys. They force feed the Dallas Cowboys down our throats, in spite of the fact that the Cowboys have not won a championship in 30 years. And it's like every time that the Cowboys lose a big game, they're acting like, okay, this was like the UNLV team with Larry Johnson and company, or this is like when Vince Young led Texas to the win over USC in the Rose Bowl. No, it's like nobody, like this year alone, nobody has the Cowboys even pegged as possibly being a playoff team, more or less being a championship team. But they keep, force feeding, the Cowboys down our throat. And if it's not Dallas Cowboys with the NFL, it's it's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. You've got 30 other teams in this league. The NFL is the most popular sport. I look at the NBA as an example. Last year, Oklahoma City, I think they won 68 games during the regular season. If my okay, so if my memory doesn't fail me, and OKC had the best record all season long, they weren't talked about. If you put on an ESPN program and they're talking about the NBA, it's Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Steph Curry. Well, I got news for you. The best years for those guys are in the rearview mirror. Why don't you start talking about a guy like an SGA who was just your MVP for the season, Finals MVP, led his team to a championship, first championship for OKC since they were the Sonics back in '79. They don't talk about baseball. They don't talk about baseball to the point that last winter when Juan Soto made the decision to sign with the Mets in free agency, I wish I could tell you I'm joking about what I'm about to say. The two people that they had talking about it on First Take were Shannon Sharp and Rex Ryan. Exactly. So it's like, yo, and it's like they're, all Shannon could say, well, you know what, it's not the Yankees because baseball's not his forte. What in the world was Rex Ryan gonna say? I'm like, again, there's plenty of ex baseball players that you could sit up there and bring onto, your set. I look at the MLB's coverage on TBS, which I do like,
Mhm.
and they all have like they have ex players on there, and not only do they have ex players on there, they have ex players that have some clout. Pedro Martinez, Hall of Famer. Jimmy Rollins, former NL MVP, World Series champion. Curtis Granderson played for three different teams that got to the playoffs: the Yankees, the Tigers, and the Mets. You've also had a Gary Sheffield on there. So there's guys out there who could talk baseball. Show these guys some love, man. It can't just be about the NBA and the NFL. And then when it is, it's only about literally two or three teams.
No, you're absolutely right, and I'm glad that you made that point because I was going to mention this later on too. Is the caliber of ex players that you know ESPN sometimes has. Sometimes they don't necessarily have guys that really made an impact in the league. Like
Right,
I remember growing up as a kid, and you remember this too. Like the analysts, they were guys that actually did something, made some noise in whatever their sport was.
right,
Maybe they were in basketball, maybe they're not a 20, 25 point a night scorer, but they definitely were, the 15, 16 solid point scorer a game.
right,
Same thing in baseball, maybe not a guy in the Hall of Fame, but probably a guy hitting a solid 275, 280,
right,
career, maybe 250, 300 home runs, something like that. Nowadays you've got guys, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but dudes that average like, 2 or 3 points a game and maybe 4 or 5 rebounds a game. And now
right,
all of a sudden, they're analysts. Like they can break down stuff better than other people. And that's exactly what I was saying, previously is like it's more just about like who can just say something ridiculous and get that clickbait for the internet.
right,
It's almost like the way how television production is, and it's not just with sports, but it's kind of with all television production now. It's kind of like you're not actually producing the show for the sake of the show for the audience to watch it live at whatever time it is that it's coming on and airing,
Yeah.
but you're almost producing it and creating it for the internet, for social media, just so you can kind of have those moments within, if it's a 30-minute show or an hour show, whatever it is, so you can have those small moments in the show that you can file down to 45 seconds, a minute and a half, and create something that's going to get a million views in a matter of a couple of minutes. So that's what we're kind of seeing, where it's not necessarily, hey, maybe this guy has more intellect on the sport and was better at the sport as opposed to this guy, but this guy might be a little bit more funnier or a little bit more with the, again, tomfoolery that I'm talking about,
Right.
that they just want to have them there, even though they're not as credible as, say, somebody else, because they may not be delivering it in the manner that society wants things delivered in now.
Yeah, no, listen, you're 100% right because it's like you look at it and, it's kind of like what we see with some professional sports teams where they might just pay one or two guys and they feel like, you know what, that guy or a couple of guys is good enough to carry the team. And I feel like in paying like a couple of guys, you know, handsomely, ESPN has, let some quality ex-athletes,
Mhm.
go by the wayside. They've also let some quality journalists, leave as well. I think back to Monday Night Countdown from probably about 15 years ago. Quality crew. You still had Chris Berman, you had Tom Jackson, you had Keyshawn Johnson, who had a solid NFL career. First overall pick, once upon a time, and a Super Bowl champion. And Keyshawn could talk sports there. You had Chris Carter, Hall of Fame wide receiver. You had Mike Ditka, Hall of Fame tight end. Of course, he was the head coach of the Bears when they won their only Super Bowl championship. Steve Young, another Hall of Fame quarterback. They had Trent Dilfer on that crew. I know I might be missing somebody, a couple of guys, but nonetheless, it was reputable and it worked. And like to your point, it's just like, we could just get anybody in here, any ex-athlete and talk sports. And then the other thing for me is I feel like not just with ESPN, but a lot of these shows that are on, national networks is that okay, you have your ex-journalist there. They bring in a pro athlete and it's one of those where they're giving their opinion about somebody and if the ex-athlete you know doesn't say what the journalist wants to say him to say, he's kind of like trying to diminish how he feels about it. And then of course the flip side of that is the whole Ryan Clark Peter Schrager incident from about a week ago
Yeah.
on ESPN. So again, it's just like it goes back to you could just say whatever you want, and the stupider the thing that you say, the more clicks and the more likes that you'll get. And it's sad because I look at ESPN now and I feel like it's the CNN/Fox News of, the sports world because they just say whatever they want. And it's just like, just to, you know, get people talking about stuff. And it's like a lot of it, is not, you know, relevant or not relevant, but credible. And it's just like, these sports shows, they were the ones who started the whole Jordan LeBron debate, during the pandemic, which I personally feel is the dumbest thing going, and people are still talking about it. People still feed off of it. And it's just, doing stuff just to say, well, you know what, we get clicks or we get likes or we get views, but you know what, all views ain't good. You know what I mean? And I just don't think people grasp that. And it's like again, I'm just not a fan of like their coverage on sports. It's like I find myself a lot of times, even if they do have a sport on, and it's an actual game, I have the mute button on. I feel like when it comes to collegiate athletics, if ESPN does not have the media rights to that league, they don't talk about them. I mean, you go back to last year's college football season. first year where ESPN ABC was not covering the Big Ten. They hardly mentioned the Big Ten on there. Okay. And of course, Ohio State went on to win the national championship. And, you had Ohio State make the playoff. You had Oregon make the playoff. Penn State and Indiana. The Big Ten sent more teams to the college football playoff last year than any other league. I think back to when the original Big East split up about 12 years ago, when the Big East went to Fox, okay? And of course, during that time, we saw Villanova win a couple of national championships. They hardly even talked about them until the championship game. Why? Because the Big East was not covered on their network. And it's like, yo, you can't call yourself the total sports or like the worldwide leader rather in sports and you take a narrative like that. It's like if it's not the Yankees, they don't talk baseball. And so it's like last year's World Series, of course, they talked about it because it was Yankees Dodgers. But the year before, it was Rangers Diamondbacks. They hardly talked about it.
Yeah. And
And
that's
I'm
exactly why they're going to lose baseball coverage here coming up soon because they've completely dropped the ball when it comes to the MLB. Like like you said, Sunday night baseball used to be,
a
must
staple.
see TV
Yes.
because it was not only was it great coverage, but they also just seemed to magically have the teams that, especially now when it came down to the stretch run, that were actually relevant and involved one way or the other.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you're going to see, the Marlins versus the Diamondbacks
Yeah.
on Sunday Night Baseball. So now it's just basically, all right, this team maybe has a star. So maybe let's throw this team against this team who has a star on there. And it's not even good baseball. One, two, the coverage. I like Eduardo Perez. I
Hmm.
actually am a fan of his
Right.
his view on the game. He's got a good personality. He's
Right.
funny. Like I like him a lot. Um, the rest of everything, like baseball tonight, it's a shell of itself. Comes on once a week now, I think. It
Yeah.
doesn't even come on nightly like it used to,
Yeah.
because ESPN just decided to stop covering baseball. And again, it all goes back to social media. Like it's so funny because ESPN is in a position and has always been in a position where they have the power to influence. Now they're essentially letting social media influence what they air, how they air it,
Hmm.
when they air it,
Yeah.
and everything else. So that's a big part there is, it's all about that clickbait.
Yeah.
And if it's something that's not quick, they can't do it. Baseball, a lot of baseball, MLB does a really good job with their page on social media, as far as like uploading stuff quick because, with social media, you've got 20, 30 seconds to get somebody's attention
Right.
before they're off, to the next thing.
Right.
So you've got to, that's why, football highlights, basketball highlights, those are quick, boom, 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 someone getting dunked on, a big hit in football or a big touchdown play, stuff like that, quick 30 seconds, you can watch it two or three times
Hmm.
and watch it in that 30 seconds and get those likes. So that's where baseball struggles to kind of get that same reaction. And because of that, instead of ESPN really having a creative force behind them in their social media department to figure out how they can market that kind of stuff, such as MLB, because like I said, I like how MLB does it. They quick, it's not drawn out with their social media clips. It's everything else you see on social media.
Right.
But ESPN just dropped the ball with that. And I think that they think that because baseball is not as popular as it used to be, as far as generating money for the from the younger crowd,
Hmm.
it's expendable to them. Perfect example. Another thing, like when you were talking about with college sports, how they don't, even acknowledge certain things that happen in their coverage on Sports Center, different things like that on the different talking head shows.
Hmm.
Um, Look at the deal they just struck with the WWE,
Yeah.
1.6 or 1.8 billion, something like that. Regardless to say, they struck a deal with WWE the very same day they took down their entire AEW page in any mentions of AEW.
There you go.
To say it for better or worse, they don't rock with people who they're not in bed with.
No, no, listen, you're 100% right. And going back to what you originally said right now about baseball, um, I think it has happened or it's going to happen. I think with MLB's next media deal, I think NBC Peacock is going to be a part of that. That's first and foremost. I think Turner is definitely going to put a real full court press to be a part of it since they lost the NBA. But also I think that MLB and ESPN might circle back to this, and I just cringe I cringe anytime that I know that ESPN is going to get a new media deal with the sports league because their coverage is terrible. But I really cringe because in listening to Rob Manfred's comments a couple of weeks ago during the Sunday night game in Williamsport, and he talked about making his league, more enticing to an ESPN, to carry things. And I say this because, of all of the talk about, realignment, when MLB adds two more teams, and like there's rumors about it being radical realignment, where like the Mets and Yankees could be in the same division. And I know people in New York, they'd be all right.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Because they don't want to see that. And basically, my point is trying to turn the MLB into like what we see with the NBA and the NHL as far as having an East and West conference. Because I think like ESPN is really they're really trying to tinker with the sauce. You cannot, when I say this, you cannot convince me, all right, that ESPN did not have a hand in helping to destroy the original Pac-12. You
mm,
cannot convince me on that. You also cannot convince me that ESPN did not have a hand in destroying the original Big East. Okay, things like that. So it's the people behind the scenes and also a network like an ESPN because they have such a big bag of money and a big scope. They're going to continue to push the bag as far as expanding the college football playoff because if you didn't have Disney willing to put up the money that they are, we wouldn't have a 12 team playoff right now. We wouldn't be talking about the potential of either a 14 or a 16 team playoff as well. Because the thing is, I feel like sports fans, want to consume as much postseason action as possible because of the intensity. I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, with MLB, for an example, you have 162 games. Do we really, need to add another round? With college basketball, we already have 68 teams in the NCAA tournament. Do we need more? Albeit, I know ESPN doesn't have their hand in that, but they do have their hand in the college football playoff. And I say this because, all right, you kind of get a feel of like who the real contenders are. And I just feel like something like that just continues to water things down. And of course, it would take away from the importance of the conference championship games for a lot of teams in college football, as an example. So I just feel like, you know what? They're just trying to tinker with the sauce so much. And the bottom line is, as long as they have that big bag of Disney cash, leagues are going to, jump, and conference commissioners and collegiate athletics are going to jump to do business with them because, hey, money talks.
yeah. And I mean, think about this, right? So, back to the whole clickbait thing, even with reading articles.
Mhm.
So, what's going to get more clicks? Oh, we're possibly thinking about realigning this division in this sport or this conference in this league, or we're going to, totally screw with the postseason, you
Yeah,
know, or oh yeah, things are just kind of business as usual, and then just kind of giving updates, little tinkers here and there.
right.
Like those articles, even if they don't come to fruition, just the stirring of the talk of that
Hmm.
kind of stuff keeps families in houses, keeps food on tables and
Yeah,
stuff like that from
yeah.
that aspect. So it's crazy. And then where does that stuff come from? It comes from these sources that people have, and stuff just gets stirred up. And
Right.
it's the beauty and also curse of, media
Yeah.
as a whole, because media has the ability to not only, deliver information as it should be, they have
Hmm.
that responsibility ethically to
Right.
deliver information as it should be, but also, you know, they have to do what's good for business. And
Right.
unfortunately, where we're at, ESPN kind of reminds me, it's like it's not completely there, but it's almost heading there to like what MTV did. So remember MTV, Golden Age back in the day, it was music television,
Hmm.
exactly what it was. You turned on MTV, you had this show, this show, this show, but they were all themed and based around music. They were either playing music videos, they were having live performances by artists or interviewing artists,
Hmm.
things like that.
Hmm.
Now, what are they doing?
Smart TV.
Now it's reality TV
Right.
24/7. And I don't even think, I could be wrong here, but I don't really think they play music unless it's like 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that, where they actually play music videos. And ESPN isn't there yet, and maybe they won't ever get there because obviously they're going to play live sports.
Right.
But as far as like the shows and the programming is concerned, in my opinion, it's like MTV.
Nah, listen, you're 100% right, and I'll see your MTV and I'll raise you one. It reminds me of, when talk shows became smut TV.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was once upon a time, if, there was a talk show on television where it was legit topics, this, that, and the third, and it's just like, the network execs are like, well, you know what happens if we do this? And of course, from that, you basically, saw, Jerry Springer with the fights and, the whole thing with, Maury Povich with, oh, you're not the father. And then I'll take it a step further with the Jenny Jones makeover, on every episode and things like that. And that's basically what it's about because I feel like when they do talk about the sports, they talk about everything, but the game. It's like they spent more time last week talking about Jalen Carter spitting on Dak Prescott than they actually did the game
Right.
between the Cowboys and the Eagles. And of course, if you're going to continuously talk about something like that, of course, the NFL is not going to have any choice but to go out there and say, hey, we've got to, react to this because what if you, and I'm not saying that Jalen Carter shouldn't have been fined, but I'm just saying from their standpoint, they're looking back like, well, we got to do something, as far as the public outcry. And it's just like, okay, let's not only show Jalen Carter spitting on Dak Prescott, let's show it in super slow mo. Okay, we have the drone flying over, so let's show it from the drone angle. All of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? And it's just unfortunately to get people talking out there. And again, I mean, when it comes to MLB, I think, the Turner's coverage is much better, with TBS. Um,
Absolutely.
I enjoy watching the games on MLB Network. I feel like I get, a lot of insight, from there and credit to MLB. I love the whole, big inning that they do when they have like four games on the screen. And it's just
Mhm.
like as soon as one game goes to commercial, they're bringing another game in. And it's especially important right now as, everybody like they're competing for postseason spots, in these final weeks of the season. So, but but like, so like, it has to be something genuine. It has to be some love there. And like, again, if it's not, you know, the Dallas Cowboys, if it's not Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they really don't talk about the National Football League like that. Listen, I guarantee you, whenever week this season it comes about where the Bills play the Chiefs, that's all they're going to talk about. Okay. And whenever, yeah, I think in a couple weeks, we've got the Packers at the Cowboys, and of course, Micah Parsons, first game back at Dallas since the trade and stuff like that. They're gonna talk about it, but it's just like the same old song and dance. I'll give you an example. Not an ESPN show. okay, but undisputed, okay, when it was still on the air. So I don't know if you remember, I think it was 4 years ago, probably a little bit more than 4 years ago, give or take. 49ers beat the Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs. This was a year that the Rams won the Super Bowl. So this is 2021, right? Okay, so 49ers went on the road. They knocked off Dallas. I think Dallas was, I can't remember where they were seated at, but they were the division champs. So I wanted to try and like listen to the show the next day. They spent the entire 2.5 hours of the show talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Mind you, that same weekend in the NFL, Kansas City eliminated Pittsburgh. That was Big Ben's last game. They didn't talk about that. The Bucks beat the Eagles in the first round, and the Bucks were looking to go back and repeat as Super Bowl champs. They didn't talk about that. That Saturday, the Cincinnati Bengals had beaten the Raiders for their first playoff victory in more than 30 years. They didn't talk about that. And I'm like, yo, okay, you can acknowledge the Dallas Cowboys. I got no beef with that. But I'm like, yo, there are still prevalent topics for the NFL, the playoffs at that. This ain't week
Right,
one we're talking about. We're talking about
right.
the playoffs. And a guy like Big Ben, who a lot of people feel that is a Hall of Fame quarterback, his career is done. And yo, you can't even sit back and acknowledge that. And I think it's the overkill of it, man. I mean, it's like, listen, I love steak like anybody else who's a carnivore, okay? But if you're gonna sit up there and start serving me steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7 days a week, at some point, listen, my stomach can't take no more, man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Give me something else. And I'm like, I feel like there's so many good topics right now with the NFL season was just started to talk about. Can the Eagles go out there and run it back? You look at Aaron Rodgers with the Steelers, Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. Can they get to the Super Bowl? Can the Bills do it? Pete Carroll with the Raiders. Okay, Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. Um, Ben Johnson, trying to turn things around with the Bears, the Rams. There's a lot of things to talk about, but it's going to be the same old song and dance. And I guarantee you, when the NBA comes around, it's going to be the same old song and dance there too. It's like I feel like, yo, this is the perfect time to talk about a New York Knicks because of all of the injuries in the Eastern Conference heading into the season. No Jason Tatum, of course, for the Celtics. No Halliburton for the Pacers. Perfect time to start talking about the Knicks, but they're gonna keep talking about, Luca and LeBron. They're gonna be talking about Steph Curry. They're gonna be talking about KD in Houston, which should get talked about. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But my point is this: let's talk about SGA. Can him and his OKC teammates can they go back there and run it back? Let's talk about these young Spurs. Things like that. These are things that I'm like, yo, these are great, sports topics in my mind that should be covered and should be highlighted.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I really believe that they're headed to the MTV way of thinking when it comes to what to air, what not to air, because it's not always about the quality of
Hmm.
what you're putting out there, but it's
Hmm.
about the quantity of
Yeah.
how much of the same thing you're putting out there, and that's what they're
Yeah.
doing. Like you named a bunch of different topics that perfect example FS1 missed out on the undisputed show following the first round of the 2021 playoffs.
Hmm.
Here's the difference between all those other good stories and the fact that it was the playoffs that you named
Right.
and what they actually talked about. Skip Bayless was the star of that show. Also, I believe he was one of 3 or 4 EPs on the show,
Yeah.
so he had his hand in the pot,
Yeah.
really putting the ingredients in it.
Hmm.
As we all know, Skip Bayless made his money off of the Dallas Cowboys, covering them for years upon years upon years.
Right.
That's his team. So, hey, this is my show. And I also helped create the show. So we're pretty much going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. Because if
Right.
you look at that show in its existence, it was completely fueled by the Dallas Cowboys and whatever team LeBron James was on because it was Skip's love for the Cowboys and his hate for LeBron that
and
fueled that show.
and there's only so much of that that you can listen to.
Right.
You know.
Like it gets exhausting after a while.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why, I guess they bring in the personalities like a Shannon Sharp. But again, Shannon is accomplished on the field, so he has the right to sit in that analyst role, in my
Right.
opinion, your opinion,
Right.
but it's some of the he brought the kind of flavor to the show, so to speak, because without that, if you really think about it, we're
Well,
getting the same steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because
and
at least with him, he's putting maybe today he's putting some Sazon on the steak. Maybe tomorrow he's putting some Montreal steakhouse seasoning. He's
right.
trying to do something different every day with that.
Well, and you know what? To your point, we saw what that show was like without him.
Yeah.
You know what
So
I'm
it
saying?
was awful.
Awful.
It was
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, FS1, they so here's a funny example. And I know we're talking about ESPN, but this is I think that they're a perfect parallel to ESPN in this because they're trying to do what ESPN is doing instead of doing what they can do. And so, you look at this last year with this new round of talking heads all day long that they decided to roll out.
Right.
They pretty much canceled all of the shows, even the new ones. And I think the only two that are left are the two actually solid ones.
First things
Obviously,
first.
the Herd, good
Yeah.
show. Colin Cowherd is respected. I respect his opinion a lot.
Hmm.
And
I
first
think
things first.
that was
I
it.
like that show too. It's pretty good. I've always liked Chris Broussard,
Hmm.
and Nick Wright is a little radical sometimes, so it's a good balance between those two. But other than that, they all of the other shows. I think it was three other shows that like brand new shows or like two brand new shows, and one was kind of revamped.
Hmm.
The show with Joy Taylor and Keyshawn and Paul Pierce,
Yeah.
but they got all of them out of there, man. And
Yeah.
and not only did they get them out of there, but the ratings were so bad and the shows were not doing what they thought they would do. They packed them up a few weeks or a month and a half early and told them just stay home and don't even come back
Right.
anymore. So they've got to figure out what they're going to do because if you keep following that blueprint,
Yeah.
you're going to run yourself into the ground quicker than they are because they're more established than you are, you know?
And like to your point, because I like you beat me to it, but they're doing it in another way as well because Fox has their big noon kickoff coverage, which basically airs, not basically, it does air at the same time as College Game Day. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, ESPN started slowly, bringing in, Pat McAfee to the show more and more because, Lee Corso was getting up in age. And of course, Lee Corso, just retired. And I think, first of all, credit to ESPN. I think that was a nice way that they sent Lee Corso out because I think, he, along with a guy like Chris Berman, and there were others, okay, but they definitely helped to make an ESPN what it is right now. I think, what Lee Corso, what he said over the years, because the thing is, it's like the younger generation might think of Lee Corso and they just think about, oh, the headgear guy. But for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, he knew what he was talking about, and most of his like game picks he got right. Okay.
Right.
But nonetheless, they started segueing to Pat McAfee more and more, and it's just like, you know, Pat McAfee is like an energy guy, and I think he's like, and now Fox's answer to that is they bring in Dave Portnoy. And I'm like, this is no
Right.
disrespect to him, but I'm like, you didn't need him. I feel like, okay, you had everything that you were doing with your pregame show already. You don't need to have another guy, just going out there. And like, I think with some of these networks, when they bring in an energy person, just because I yell and scream doesn't mean that I know what I'm talking about. And that's not a slight to anybody I just mentioned. I'm just saying it in general. And, I just, again, it just goes back to, the suits behind the scenes and like what's going to go out there and what's going to get you, clickbaits and things like that. is just for a sports fan. Okay, I guarantee you, if they, surveyed, the average sports fan, the average sports fan, they want the meat and potatoes. They want the coverage of the game. Okay, I don't know about you, unless I'm starving. Okay, and I'm a big guy, but unless I'm starving, if I go to a restaurant, I don't really thumb around with the appetizers and like, they bring you the complimentary bread and like all that other jazz and stuff like that. I want the main course. I want my meat. I want my veggies. I want my starch. We worry about that other stuff afterwards. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of how I am with my sports coverage. I don't need to see, multiple hours of pregame. I don't need to see, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, you know what? Show me the game. Give me the facts.
Right.
Because like I feel like guys like you and I, we're in a fact-based business, and clearly this channel doesn't have the reach or the scope or, the followers like, the big boys do, and that's fine. But, I personally can appreciate the fact that the bulk of the people who do follow and support us, are meat and potato sports guys. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And I got no issue with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's like I just, you know, sometimes you get a steak and it has, fat on there. And I'm like, you got to trim that fat off. You just want the beef. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? We need to get rid of all of that other stuff. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. And it's unfortunately this, like I said, it's social media kind of running it. And I will pivot real quick and say one thing I will give ESPN their props for is giving us the ability to pretty much watch anything now. Sports, like actual games. Like, yes, the coverage is not necessarily the best leading up to, especially the bigger games.
Hmm.
And then also maybe even some of the in-game commentary is not the best because they're spreading themselves so thin with so many games to cover. But me personally, like, so I just got the new ESPN bundle with Hulu, Disney, all that stuff. It's like $30 a month or something like that.
Hmm.
The reason I got it was multiple reasons. One, because now you have the ability, you don't have to like go through cable and add ESPN U, ESPN Classic, ESPN SEC, all of these
Right.
different things. They all come bundled with that.
Hmm.
And like, dude, Saturday was like the most enjoyable experience for me. Like literally just I don't know how many parts of how many different games I watched, but it was probably the most ever in one day ever because like literally watching just random games that I would have never had access to before this app came out. So I will give them props as far as that's concerned because basically all I was doing, they have like, the four, you can watch the four in one screen and all of that. I was watching for like whichever games were close and intense moments. And then like, okay, this is the game I'm watching for 5 minutes, or this is the game I'm watching for 7 minutes if it's really, really good.
Right.
And then you go back to the main menu and then it gives you like the blocks of all the different games, and then it shows you like the scores and the time left and what quarter it's in and everything like that. So it's like it for me, that's perfect because especially when we're talking these first couple weeks of college football,
Yeah.
unless it's like a marquee matchup, you're getting a lot of 70-7 games.
Right.
So if I can be spared that kind of stuff to where I can just literally go to every game that's close, that
Right.
like that was money. Like seriously. I appreciate that. I can't wait till Saturday coming up. Like Saturday was almost better than Sunday, like
Mhm.
just watching games, man.
Yeah. Nah. Listen. I mean, I haven't checked it out myself, but I definitely got to take your word for it as far as them, striking gold on it. I just personally would just like to see, them just get back to the basics. That's just, my 2 cents on the matter. I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to see it um get to that point, but I truly do feel that, something needs to change in the coverage.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And one other thing I will give them a little bit of props for too, and it's kind of with the app,
Hmm.
the documentaries, like, they're
Oh, the 30 for 30.
always, yeah, like
Listen.
that kind of stuff is always, and even like some of the newer programming, and
Hmm.
shout out to Peyton Manning and his Omaha production crew, because like the Peyton's places, the Eli's places,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've checked out any of those, but
Nah,
those are pretty good too.
I've never like checked out that or the Manning cast or like for an example,
The Manning cast is pretty solid.
when they have like let's say it's a national championship game and like they'll have the coverage from different aspects on different, channels. Honestly, I just I just have the game on and like honestly sometimes I just mute the sound. And I
Good.
just because like I like to mute the sound because I like to see it from my perspective. I don't like to see it, from what somebody else is telling me on the television, and that's no disrespect to any commentators. I've just been doing that for quite some time. It's just my way of doing things. But yeah, listen, I mean, it's one of those. I will give them credit, for certain innovations. One thing that ESPN brought in, and I think the casual football fan, might take it for granted right now. They were the first ones to bring in that first down line,
Yeah,
digital one.
yeah,
I remember when Fox picked up NFL coverage back in '94, they were the first ones to put the score, on the TV screen, at all times during the game. And ESPN brought in the digital first down. I think those two things were big, for football coverage. But nonetheless, I truly do think that some things definitely need to change, as far as their coverage goes for the casual fan, man.
yeah, absolutely. And here's another problem that I can definitely see with the level of talent, so to speak, that they may have on air. They're kind of like an NFL team. And I say that because they're giving their quarterback essentially, Stephen A, they're giving him, 20, 25, 30% of the salary cap.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you are giving, your top player that much, how are you filling out the rest of your roster?
Right.
And that's what I think they're struggling with too, because at the end of the day, you know, whoever is in charge, creative director, can say, yeah, I want this person, this person, this person, this person. But then when you take that to the numbers person who's going to say, well, this is our budget, how are we going to,
Yeah.
facilitate this? Oh, well, maybe we're okay. Well, we're definitely going to keep our quarterback, but maybe that, top line wide receiver that we had our eye on, maybe we might, instead of getting A plus guy, maybe we'll just get a B minus guy.
Yeah, nah, listen, I was alluding to that earlier, and I think you took that to a whole nother level, into a whole nother stratosphere, and really opened it up. And like, I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's a problem because, I think back for me, one of my favorite pregame shows of all time, my two favorite old school NFL on CBS, and I'm talking about, when Brent Musburger was leading the charge. You had legit guys in the studio, and then I think back, to when Fox first came onto the scene, and you're talking about Howie Long, Jimmy Johnson, and Terry Bradshaw, and then of course, the joke, the hardest working man in on Fox Sports, James Brown when he was there
Mhm.
at the time. But nonetheless, you gave me legit guys, and it's like even with Fox's pregame coverage now, Terry Bradshaw's still there, Jimmy Johnson just retired, but then you bring in a Rob Gronkowski, you bring in a Michael Strahan, guys that is you like, you know what? When you listen to them talk, they've got some cachet. And the things that they said, like even like Howie Long for so many years, you know, they had Howie's tough guys. And it was kind of like, another aspect of the all Madden team. And, you had Howie Long's tough guys. And when you think about it, if anybody saw Howie Long play, Howie Long was a tough guy
Right.
on the D line for so many years for the Raiders. And even with a guy like John Madden, you know, the fact that it was John Madden and John Madden meant so much to the National Football League as a head coach. So it was like, yo, guys really look to being on the All Madden team almost as much as they looked to being on the Pro Bowl. You know what I'm saying? But again, it was legit things, it was legit guys, and they had cachet behind them, man. And it's like now, to your point, it's just like, yo, let's just get anybody in here
Mhm.
talking, and it's just like it doesn't give that same vibe to it, man.
No, I mean, it takes, a little bit of the credibility off of
Oh,
what they're saying,
absolutely.
first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And then second of all, it takes a little bit of the shine off the diamond, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like it's instead of it now being a really bright kind of flawless diamond, now you're looking at this diamond that's kind of cloudy and it's got some scratches and cuts when they were mining it.
It's like listening. It's like putting Al Bundy up there. Basically, Al Bundy just reminiscing about how he scored 4 touchdowns in one game.
Right, exactly.
You know,
I mean, look at ESPN's shuffle again. Like let's look at their basketball coverage. For the past, I don't know, what has it been, 5, 6 years now since Van Gundy and Mark Jackson have been gone?
something like that.
They can't figure it out, man. Like
Oh,
every time you turn around, it's shuffle, 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 shuffle. The
and
only consistent is Mike Breen.
and they're shuffling again because
Yeah,
now I think they're gonna switch
Doris Burke for Tim Legler.
to right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's listen, you gotta be on point with that stuff. And I mean, even like with Fox, for an example, for so many years, Fox with their with their announced teams on the road, they were on point. It's like like for so many years, Daryl Johnston was like the second guy for
Hmm.
Fox. And of course, Moose has gotten older now and it's not the same. And Moose Johnston, he could really talk football. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? And I feel like I always felt like he was like an overshadowed important piece to what Dallas did on offense for so many
Yeah.
years. Okay, I know like a couple of years ago, Fox brought in Rondé Barber, as one of their color analysts, and then now you look at what Jonathan Vilma is doing, and of course mentioning Rondé Barber, we're talking about a Hall of Fame defensive back. Jonathan Vilma was a darn good linebacker in the
Hmm.
National Football League for so many years. Now they've added Mark Sanchez as a color guy for them. I think Mark Sanchez does a solid job. They've also brought in Greg Olson, who's done a good job. And I know some people are gonna look at this and say, well, what in the world are you talking about? I'm one of those in the minority of of the camp that I think Tom Brady's doing a better job than a lot of people want to give him credit for. I think he is improving, but I
Yeah.
think he's a guy who he's gonna talk X's and O's with you. He's not gonna be a rah rah, let's go out there and get him, let's do backflips type guy. But if you want to listen to the X's and O's of the game. He knows the ins and outs. Maybe he doesn't, he's working on it as far as like translating it over, you know, to relate to the casual fan, but it's still a work in progress. But if you're a football person, I feel like you can listen to him.
Yeah.
So it's like, Fox has done a solid job with that. I feel like CBS, has done a solid job, with
Oh,
that. But
Tony Romo's great.
I'm I'm not a big Tony Romo fan. I
I,
I I,
I, I like I like his insight to offense.
mhm. I've never really been the biggest Tony Romo fan. For like with him in the booth. Uh, when I think about CBS, I'm old school with it. One of my favorite, pairings that they had, once CBS got the AFC package, I was a fan of when they had the late Dick Enberg with Dan Dierdorf because Dan
Yeah.
Dierdorf, I was always a fan of Dan Dierdorf's from when he used to call the Monday night games with Frank Gifford and Al Michaels. But a Dan Fouts, I could listen to Dan Fouts talk football, one of the greatest quarterbacks, to ever play the game and stuff like that. And now, a lot of people are praising JJ Watt because they feel like JJ Watt could be the next good guy. They've had Matt Ryan in the booth and stuff like that. Guys like that. And I know even a Phil Simms, I know some people didn't like to hear, Phil Simms talk, but Phil Simms knew football. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? And now he's back working on NBC, and I'm sure at some point, for the nostalgia aspect, NBC is going to try to do something, probably have him and his son Chris in the booth at the same time. But yeah, it's but like give me guys who, have that clout. Give me guys who have that cachet and can back it up and know what they're talking about?
right. Actually have real skin in the game in
Yeah,
whatever their prospective sport is,
yeah.
because at the end of the day, that's what this is supposed to be when it
Hmm.
comes to that two-man booth. You
Yeah,
got your play-by-play who went to school for journalism,
right,
who studied this, who, has good voice, steady presence on the microphone.
right,
And then your color analyst is supposed to be someone who is in the trenches in whatever that sport was and is respected by his peers and
right.
also the players of today. Not somebody who's going to be like, dude, like, what are you telling me? I was like, I'm way better than you ever were. Like, so I don't know where things kind of got. I don't know who the first one was to kind of make that not be the case, but as we keep going on, you're seeing more and more of these guys who, really weren't that good, but because they can crack a joke or, maybe look good in a suit, they're on TV.
Yeah, and and again, like you said, it's just adding to, what they've been doing as far as like, what, we can just go out there and put anybody out there and give them a microphone, that says ESPN on it, and we can make them a star. And it's one of those. It's like you can go to the well so many times with that before it backfires. And I think because of that, at some point, they're going to have to change the narrative. I don't know when that's going to be. I definitely don't think it's going to be today or tomorrow, but at some point they're going to have to change that narrative. Just my 2 cents.
It's kind of like I think they're. I'm not going to speak for them or put words in their mouth, but to me, it kind of seems like they have pivoted from being that source of trusted information that everyone once looked at to now more glitz and glamour Hollywood, to where it's, hey, you know what we're about. We're about the top stories. We're about the stuff that, pop culture is buzzing about right now. We're going to give it to you this way. And if you're looking for more in-depth coverage, so to speak, for each particular sport, hey, go to MLB Network. Hey,
Oh,
go to NBA Network. Hey, go to NFL Network, which they just recently acquired. So it's kind of like that's what they're kind of basically saying to us.
listen, and to your point, and you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, I was on Twitter when that news broke as far as, them picking up Red Zone,
Mm-hmm.
and like 95% of the people, 95% of the feedback was negative because
Yeah.
it's kind of, like they kind of think like us. And it's just like when I know that ESPN is going to pick up the media deal for a league, I'm kind of like Martin when he found out that Tommy was dating Pam. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, I mean, I had a pipe dream where once I knew the NBA's contract was up, and I knew Amazon wanted to get into the mix, as well as NBC. I'm like, yo, please let it be NBC, Turner, and Amazon,
Yeah.
because it's like, like the NBA's coverage on ABC and ESPN. It's like it hasn't been great. I feel like the only time that is decent for me is during the playoffs. I've never been a fan of ESPN's pregame show
Mm-hmm.
for basketball. I think back, when we had NBA Showtime on NBC, And of course, that intro song, everybody knew that intro. So,
Right.
that's first and foremost. And then, I think for the longest time it was Bob Costas who was hosting the studio show, and they'd have Peter Vesey, and then they would have,
Mhm.
a couple of ex players. I know at one point it was Dr. J, as a as a studio analyst. I can't remember who else exactly right now, but you know what? It was legit package, with it, man. And like it's we've just like you said, we just watered it down and diluted it so much, man. And it's just like, it's it's like going from Pepsi or Coke to like CNC Cola.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Or the store brand.
And it's like, listen, if you if your parents were on a budget, growing up, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? That as my grandmother would say, the rock gut soda. you know that's basically what we've gotten to with the sports coverage,
Right. Absolutely, man. And
Yeah.
and hopefully, we're getting some new blood in there, like you said, with NBC coming back into the NBA. Hopefully that stirs the pot a little bit to make
Mhm.
ESPN get on their game a little bit more. And then, them losing MLB to me is well, if they do, which I hope they do, it's going to be a blessing because, like you said, if TNT can figure out a way, if Turner can figure out a way to get the lion's share of baseball coverage, I'm all
Oh,
for that
oh, it'd be
because
beautiful.
that team is first class. And Fox, they do a decent job, so I can
Mhm.
I can have them as the number two when it comes to baseball. And
NBC.
Apple,
Well, no,
they play
Apple,
their Friday night game. Are
Apple,
they out of it?
yeah, Apple's going to be out because the thing
Okay.
is like, I know Apple like is rumored to be picking up Formula One, and the thing is like a lot of like Apple doesn't get as many subscribers
Right.
as you would think, and I think that would be something that Formula One would lose from, but that's a whole other topic for another day. But I think it's probably going to be NBC Peacock. Um, Definitely Turner's going to be in that mix. I think they got more money to play with. Fox, I think, is definitely going to be in it, and maybe probably an ESPN. But I think from what I've heard, what NBC and Peacock are looking to do is they want to have a prime time game all year long because of course right now we've got Sunday night
Mhm.
football. They've got the package with the NBA, which is about to begin in a couple of weeks. So they're gonna have a prime time, weekend night game, and then they want to do that with Major League Baseball. But I'll circle back to Major League Baseball real quick. One of the things that hurt ESPN's coverage of Sunday night baseball was Joe Girardi. And the reason why I
Mhm.
say it is because the Yankees are a marquee team and the Yankees are on there a lot. And Joe Girardi started to get upset about that. And he wasn't just upset that the Yankees were consistently on Sunday night baseball, but it might be one of those where, like, okay, they played a Sunday night game, in the Bronx. And of course, in those days, if they played the Red Sox, you knew that was a 5 hour, 9 inning game.
Right.
Okay. So that's number one. But then MLB would turn around and have them playing Monday night in like Texas or like Kansas City or something like that. And he's like, wait a minute, we're constantly doing this. What about everybody else? So they've tried to like spread it around more. And of course, it doesn't have the same luster because primetime slots are for primetime teams and primetime players, and that's why I applaud the NFL and NBC because second half of the season, they're flexing that Sunday night game, so
Mhm.
we're gonna get we're gonna get Chiefs and Bills as opposed to maybe it might be Raiders, Giants or something like that. You know what I mean? So but like yeah, to your point, if Paul Skeens isn't pitching, nobody wants to see Pittsburgh.
No.
Okay. And I mean, there was a time when you wanted to see Mike Trout, but Mike Trout, unfortunately, due to the injuries, is a shell of himself. But there's still a market for the Dodgers for so many stars in their team. There's clearly a market for the Yankees with Aaron Judge. There's a market for the Mets, with Juan Soto. If you're going to put teams on there, it's got to be the marquee guys. That's something I think they're definitely going to circle back to with this new media deal. But again, I would like to see ESPN not be on it because maybe when you lose something, it makes you have to work harder
Right.
to go back and fix it. And it's just like now that ESPN has basically outbid everybody to re-up with the NBA, it's not going to make them work harder as far as their production. NBC and Amazon, yes, because those guys were desperate to get in on the mix because you figure it's been more than 20 years since the NBC lost the NBA package, and of course Amazon is trying to quickly show, listen, we can be players when it comes to our sports coverage. Now, their NFL coverage, solid. Their NASCAR coverage this season, that's got to be a work in progress. Okay, I'll tell you like that. Because trust me, I watched multiple NASCAR races on Amazon. They got their work cut out for them. Their
Yeah.
production of the Coca-Cola 600, as an example, was not good. But nonetheless, I would, from the baseball aspect, I would love to see um, ESPN, maybe miss out on that. I mean, I look at it, they were so desperate to get the SEC, away from CBS. And even though ESPN had a Saturday night primetime SEC game for years, but
Mhm.
they were so desperate to get that 3:30 window away from CBS because that right there was big because CBS, albeit that they only gave you one game per weekend with college football. They had some games on the CBS Sports Network, but you knew that 3:30 slot, they were giving you a ranked team
Yep.
every single week. Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, um, you know, Texas A&M, LSU, whoever. Okay, and now the Big Ten's in that slot, and of course, as their season progresses, they've got CBS, they've got Fox, and then they've got NBC as well. But like, I mean, with the Big Ten, their 12 o'clock game on Fox is, for the most part, their best game. But again, it's just like getting that ESPN, like the umbrella off of everything. Because if they have to come back to something, maybe like a baseball, for an example, it would make them work harder.
Right. No, I totally agree because if you think about it, like all they're doing right now is throwing money at problems. And in the NBA, perfect example with their coverage, the problem, they know it's a problem because if they didn't, they wouldn't keep reshuffling and tinkering with stuff. So how do they throw money at the problem this offseason? Oh, let's buy inside the NBA and let's basically have it on our network. So that's what they think the band-aid is going to be for their NBA coverage is bringing in a proven Emmy winner year after year after year. And that's not going to get the job done when it comes to everything else because it's only going to be that 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, however often they're going to do it. That's
And
the only thing that's going to be fixed is just that little hole.
and they're gonna ruin it because there's already talks of like them really, I think, like they're going to use them maybe like the first week of the season, and then they're not going to be back on there for a
Mm,
couple of weeks. And it's just like, I'll tell you like this, Charles Barkley being Charles Barkley, Charles Barkley's going to let some people know how he feels, whether they want to hear it or not. And it's one of those where they are going to Yoko Ono inside the NBA. They're going to ruin it.
I hope not.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Inside the NBA is such a great show that all you have to do is let them know that the red light is on and your night is done. But
Right.
ESPN being ESPN, they're going to find a way to ESPN it. And in doing so, they're going to ruin it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I hope not, man. I really hope not. And if they do that, then seriously, they need to self-examine their whole NBA coverage because that show, I don't know how many years in a row, but it's like over 10 that they've won an Emmy. Like it's a
Listen,
ridiculous streak.
I have been watching that show and some. shape, or fashion since we were in high school. Because,
Right.
of course, you think back to those days and they, like the post game show was on every night, after a playoff game, whether the game was on TBS or TNT. And I remember one year, and I laughed about it with several guys. It seemed like one year their playoff coverage, once the post game show was over, TNT was showing above the rim every single night. Okay, but nonetheless, it's like it's sacrilege, and it's something that's very hard to screw up, but they're going to screw it up. It's kind of like if Bob Barker was still hosting The Price is Right, and NBC takes over, and they completely try to change the format, but you still want to have Bob Barker out there with the microphone. It ain't going to be the same.
No,
you know,
not
it,
at all.
nah, it's like, you know, it's like basically watching, you know, wrestling and them doing a switcheroo, and then you have The Rock taking on Stone Cold's character, and then you have Stone Cold's taking on The Rock's character. It wouldn't work.
Right.
It wouldn't work. And it's just like I feel like what made inside the NBA so real and so legit to a lot of people is that I feel like the suits behind the scenes, they let those guys be themselves, because it's like they just look back and like sat back and like, you know what? We've got gold right here.
Right.
And it's just like, yo, listen, you just let them guys do what they do. You give them a mic and that's it, man.
Sometimes, that's the best thing to do when you're in a position of, like a coach or an owner or, whatever, a program director. Like if you
Hmm.
know you've got a solid team and they're handling business, yeah,
Let them rock.
you
Yo,
might want a little here and there, but for the most part,
let them
let them
rock.
do their thing,
Yeah.
because hey, you got to first pat yourself on the back for putting those people in a position to even do that. So if you want some type of credit or some type of acknowledgement, pat yourself on the back for that you hired talented, skilled people that are able
Yeah.
to give a quality product time and time again. And don't tinker with the sauce.
Yeah.
Don't mess with stuff. Just let it go.
Yeah. And
Look at John Madden and Pat Summerall. What did Fox do as soon as they got the NFL from CBS? Well, we need those guys too. We're taking over their product. If we're taking their product, we have to take the exact formula.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to work.
And Fox was so smart because it's a little known fact. They signed Summerall first because Madden
Hmm,
didn't want to go. And
hmm,
like they sweetened the pot for John Madden, and they gave him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And then once, age started to catch up with Pat Summerall at Fox, and they were trying to push him out the door, John Madden said, "I'm done," and he wasn't going to work for Fox without Pat Summerall, and that's when John Madden went to ABC.
hmm,
Okay, and then from there, of course, once NBC picked up the Sunday night package, they brought Madden in, and of course, he finished his career there with Al Michaels. Well, he was with Al Michaels at ABC, but nonetheless, even with that, it still wasn't the same. But um, if you want, the best guys, you have to put them in the right spot. I think back, and like some old school folks might remember this. I think back when NBC lost the NFL package back in 97. 97 was their last year. Okay, Dick Enberg stayed with NBC for a couple of years. He was calling Notre Dame games and stuff like that, to eventually, I think around 99 or 2000, his contract was up with NBC and he went to CBS. And while he was with CBS, as soon as he walked through the door at CBS, what was one of the first things they did? Of course, we know we're going to have Dick Enberg calling NFL games again, but then also they had him on college basketball. And what did they do? They paired him up immediately with Billy Packer and, of course, Al McGuire, the late Al McGuire, the former Marquette head coach. because the three of them worked together calling games for NBC when NBC
Mhm.
used to have a college basketball package. So it's just like, you know what? CBS was like, you know what? We're gonna put this back together, and it's like, yo, again, you got gold. Just push the button and stand out of the way and let them do the thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I hope ESPN doesn't mess with inside the NBA and they kind of look at situations like that. If something's already a well-oiled machine in place, you don't think you can go ahead and put your spin on it because your spin is probably going to be the kiss of death to
Oh, it will
whatever
be.
that is. And
Oh,
we've seen that time and time again. Like, so do you remember First Take when it first came out? It was Cold Pizza. It
mm-hmm.
was a decent show.
Woody Page and Skip Bayless.
Over the years, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's crazy how you just, you got something in place that works, and then you just tinker and tinker and tinker to the point where it doesn't even resemble what it originally was.
Dude, it's like, anybody who or grew up following rap in the 90s, we all knew, okay, a lot of Biggie's stuff that he put out, he just freestyle, put it off the top of his head. And it's kind of like Puff walking into the studio and just like, you know what? Stop the tape. Bro, you need to write this down on a pen and pad. It's not gonna have the same effect
Right.
from a guy like Biggie. Once you get into that zone, it's like, you know what, you're in that zone, and it's like the same thing. That's why I feel like, you know what, they're gonna mess this up, man. It's what they do.
And that's going to be sad to see if it does happen.
Yep.
Hopefully they get a one more year of a run without it being completely screwed up.
Listen, it's only a matter of time. It's like they're gonna do something, mess around. Charles Barkley, might just drop his mic on national television, or Charles might be there, and then when they come back from commercial break, there's an empty chair, and Charles is literally taking his ball and going home, and then I could just see Charles just jumping on different people's podcasts and just saying whatever he wants to say because that's who Charles Barkley is. Shaq is always going to be Shaq because he's got a million and one businesses and commercials and stuff like that. But it's like a well-oiled machine, man, and it's it's going to be sad because they're going to screw it up, man.
So is Ernie staying with Turner Sports and like
Ernie,
baseball and other things?
Ernie, from what I'm told, he's staying with Turner, but
Okay.
it's like I think it's one of those where like it's still because they lobbied for it
Mhm.
the inside the NBA guys as far as like, you know what, it's still gonna be a lot of their studio crew
Right.
um doing the show because they went to the Turner execs and they were like, listen, there's a lot of jobs on the line here, and that's real because those guys in front of the camera, they're gonna be all right, win or lose.
Hmm.
But the folks behind the scenes, those are the ones who were really hurt. If you lost something like that, and they went to bat for those people because listen, you know, anybody who knows anything about television production or movie production, they know it's the people behind the scenes that make the people in front of the camera look good. So for the
Yep.
most part, those people who are in front of the camera, they appreciate the people behind the scenes. And it's like, you work with them and you become family. You like,
Absolutely.
you're around them, more than like your actual family members and stuff like that. So you develop that rapport. And it's just like it's not only you become family with them, but it's like, you might meet the wives, you might meet the husbands, you might meet the children, and you're like, wow, this dude, his kids just graduating high school, he's getting ready to go to college or whatever like that. I'm like, man, we can't afford to have him, have to go out there and look for another job and stuff like that. And then it was also to the point that they went out there, the inside the NBA guys, and they made sure that some of those guys who work behind the scenes on the games for TNT, they got jobs with like ESPN as camera people or like
Mhm.
or NBC or Amazon and things like that. So it's one of those, real respects real moments right there. But again, like I'm saying, just don't mess it up, man.
No, that's deep right there, man. Shout
Hmm.
out to them for doing that because
Yeah,
that's real right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I didn't even know about that,
Hmm.
but ESPN, hopefully they don't, jack it up like they do everything else. I mean, even look at the hockey coverage. man, like during the NHL, like at one point in time, they had hands down the best hockey coverage that you could imagine from everything from production of the shows to the coverage that they gave them on Sports Center. And now it's like nothing.
It was, listen, the NHL coverage was so much better when it was on NBC. And then it was like, even like when Fox first got that package, when Fox was blowing up as a network, because I loved, where Fox would put that red tracker on
Mm,
the on the puck, for like those hard shots and stuff like that. But again, ESPN is gonna ESPN, man. They like Disney's gonna Disney, and they're gonna mess it up, man. So
yeah,
like, again, like I said, that's why I cringe when I know they're picking up a package, man.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I appreciate the abundance of games that they now offer,
Hmm.
but as far as the coverage leading up to it and the talking heads during the day, man, like just talk about more stuff, man. Like the shows back in the day, every show back in the day used to have their own set of topics. Now every show has the same set of
Same
topics and they
stuff.
just talk about it differently.
And more often than not, it's not even about sports. Hence why I said,
Yeah,
it's kind of like, watching CNN or Fox News or any other of these
yeah,
other news outlets. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, sports folks don't want to hear that. Sports folks, you put on a certain network because you want to watch sports.
right. Don't want to hear about people's personal lives
No,
and different things like that. I want to hear
no.
about the X's and O's and what's going on leading up to the game, what happened after the game.
Listen, even on last year, I think because it was ESPN's first year of covering the SEC championship game. I know that for years, for basically throughout the 90s, the SEC championship game was on ABC. Okay, and it
Mhm.
wasn't. I think like I think 2001 was the first year that CBS got the SEC championship game. Okay, yeah, it was because it was on Tennessee LSU. But nonetheless, okay, so you had Georgia and Texas playing for the SEC championship game. So they had media coverage with both teams at their respective hotels. It's basically treating it like the Super Bowl, when you see that. But it was to the point that they even put cameras on the bus, coming to the stadium. And I'm like, yo, I don't need to see Steve Sarkisian having a drink of water. I don't
Right,
need to see Steve Sarkisian having a sandwich or something like that. I'm like, bro, listen, let me know when the game is starting.
right.
You-
Remember when all of that stuff used to just be saved for the Super Bowl only?
yeah,
And now it's like a game in the middle of freaking October's got to get that treatment.
yeah, and it's like, the Super Bowl was the game when you had, wall to wall pregame, and it's just like, it's, dude, I don't even watch the pregame anymore. It's like, now, you know, I'm putting on a game like, okay, maybe like 5 minutes before it starts. And
Mhm.
again, like I said, more often than not, I got the mute button on. And it's just like, it might be something where I'm like, I'm looking at the game and then, okay, I'll stop and I'll do something with my kids if they ask me a question or something like that. And then I'm like, okay, I'll go back and check it out. But it's just like, it's not the same because of their production and their just touch on it. And it's just, ugh, nah.
Yeah. And I mean, also, like, remember shows like Stump the Schwab and, just the random shows. Like, they've gone away from that. It's either the same Sports Center episode on loop for hours on end, or it's the talking heads all talking about the same stuff.
But
There's
even,
no more like specialty shows.
even with Sports Center, and I, just changing the subject real quick, I had the privilege of I tried out for Stump the Swab one time. Okay, and
Nice.
it was a nice experience. Okay, but the thing is like even with Sports Center, I remember it being an event because first of all you heard the theme, dun 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 dun, but not only that, it was always like, okay, who are going to be the anchors that are going to be giving the highlights tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was like everybody brought something different to the
Mm-hmm.
table. I mean, I know like when people think about Stuart Scott, first thing they want to say is booyah. But I'm like, honestly, it was like some of his other stuff that that he would say, like, as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Yep.
And then for me, I remember one time, Devon White was playing center field. I think it was for the Blue Jays, and he was like, "Oh, if you don't think Devon White's gonna catch that ball, you better recognize," or stuff like that. And then,
Hmm.
when Rich Eisen was like in his prime on ESPN, I remember one time the Celtics and the Knicks had a game, and Rich Eisen was like, "Yeah, it's a battle of the Garden and the Garden." So it's like, basically, making fun of how people from both New York and Boston talk.
Right.
But and it was like so many other guys like that, Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann. We could just go right down the list. Everybody brought something, different to the state, to the table, because it was all about this style. And it's just like, I feel like it's such a carbon copy all across the board, as far as
They're
like,
all same.
yeah, and it's like the same analytic driven aspect, as it is for leagues. It's like basically you're just teaching them how to act like this, in school, and then it's just like, they're really not developing your personality. And unless you yell, that's the only way that you're going to show energy and love and passion for it. And I just think it's wrong.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy that SportsCenter has fallen off how much it has. Like I remember every night I used to watch
Yeah.
SportsCenter. Now there are weeks that I don't watch SportsCenter. Maybe even a month, 2 months goes by and I'm not watching SportsCenter, and I don't miss it. Like I remember before, you know, 20 years ago, I miss a night of SportsCenter and I feel like the whole week screwed up.
Yeah.
Now I can go a month, 2 months, and oh yeah, let me actually turn on SportsCenter and see what they're talking about. And it's the same formula that they have with the talking head
Yeah.
shows, where it's the clickbait. Let's
Yep.
run all of that stuff off the top,
Yep.
and let's run that for the majority of the show, and then like let's squeeze in some highlights of some games here or there, like baseball and hockey. They just get the short end of the stick on Sports Center all the time now, to where it used to be they would get their due, where every game highlights are being showed. Now you're probably cramming in 15 MLB games in one night in a 5 to 7 minute block.
And that's why I'm so thankful I have the MLB network. I'm also thankful I have the NHL network. And I'm also thankful that I have NBA TV, because if
Yeah.
I put on NBA TV, okay, they're going to have guys on there that have played the game, that are going to be talking about each team, like each game that they just highlighted, and say, okay, why this team won and why this team lost. And I thought, I think back to like watching NBA TV, Dennis Scott, who, a lot of the young kids might not know this. Dennis Scott was a prolific, 3-point shooter during his heyday, being that guy, because he got so many open shots, because like guys were double teaming Shaq and Penny in those days with Orlando. But nonetheless, Dennis Scott gave one of the best talks about basketball a couple of years ago on NBA TV. And he talked about the importance of ball movement. That's something that you're not going to get on ESPN right now when they talk about their NBA coverage, especially during the highlights, because they don't show highlights, for the most part. But it was like, listen, they'll give you a breakdown of every single team, and I'm like, listen, a show like NBA TV throughout the season, they were giving OKC their flowers.
Mm-hmm.
They were giving the Cleveland Cavaliers their flowers and stuff like that. And it's like the same thing with inside the NBA, because they're like, hey, y'all need to watch about this team. Y'all need to look at what the Spurs, are doing, pre-Wemby injury and things like that. You know, that's what you need, man. That's what you
Yeah,
need. And it's the same thing with the NHL. It's the same thing with MLB, because listen, you have people that played the game covering those sports on those channels.
absolutely, man. And not only were they playing those sports, but they were playing them at a high level,
Yeah,
as opposed to just having a spot in the league, so to speak.
yeah. Listen, I mean, like again, you go back to TBS's coverage of baseball. Okay, i- is anybody going to question what Pedro Martinez did on the mound? I mean, is anybody going to question what Jimmy Rollins did on the field? I mean, listen, They only give out one NL MVP a year. He has one. Okay.
Right.
Curtis Granderson was a darn good player, darn good leadoff hitter. For so many years, he could also hit in the two slot. For a team if need be. And Curtis Granderson was a good locker room guy. Curtis Granderson was a leader, and I think all of those traits have carried over. When you put him in front of a camera.
And then look at inside the booth, during the games. Ron
Yeah,
Darlin and Jeff Francoeur.
yeah,
Both of those dudes were good players who made at least one All-Star appearance.
right.
So, like that should be the barometer. If you haven't made an All-Star appearance, you shouldn't be allowed to talk on TV.
Yeah, listen, all-star game appearances. Ron Darling was a World Series champion. I think Ron Darling, I forgot how many career wins he had. I don't know if he reached the 200 win mark or whatever like
He
that.
had a
But
solid career.
yeah, and on top of that, he's an intelligent guy because he went to Yale.
Right.
So it's not like he went to Belt Parkway Community College or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's I think all of those things factor in, and it's just like you know watching like I have learned so much hockey from watching the NHL network because of the folks that they put on there. I've learned so much basketball, from watching, NBA TV from the guys that they put on there. And the same thing could be said about the NFL. I mean, the NBA network. And even when the NFL network, before it went under this whole ESPN umbrella, and of course, ESPN is going to ESPN that as well. Listen, listen, you got good coverage, man.
Mhm.
You got legit coverage, man. And it's just again, like you said, man, not trying to beat a dead horse, but it's just watering it down, man.
Yeah. And hopefully, we know it's going to happen with NFL Network, but hopefully it doesn't happen too soon. Like, hopefully, we still get this season worth of actual, essential sports programming network like what we need and not what ESPN wants to water it down and give us.
Oh, listen, I mean, listen, the pallbearers are getting the casket ready for the NFL. And I think inside NBA, the NBA is going to be next too, and it's just unfortunate, man.
And that's really sad to hear, man. I hope not.
But there you have it, folks. We have talked a lot. We've given our opinions on this topic, and we hope that you liked what you heard and saw from the two of us this evening. And Mark, as always, my man, thank you so much for chiming in. You are making me jealous with your setup in the background right there. You've definitely got you got your man cave going on right there, and now I got to sit down and might have to talk to the wife and see, how we can, adjust some stuff around here, man. But as always, man, it's a pleasure to have you on here, man.
Thanks, man. It's always a pleasure being on with you, bro.
Hmm. And for all of you folks out there, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. If you're on the X, check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports. You can give me that. If you give me that follow, I'll give you the follow right back. And the same goes for Instagram at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. And then there's also Facebook where you can check us out at Sports Depot 365. And Mark, just before we go, any um any social media platforms that the folks can find you on?
Not right now. Not really
Okay.
doing much with that stuff. Just
Okay.
kind of ramping up, kind of crazy with work season, man. But yeah, I'll have some stuff going. I'm still working on getting a website going for my voiceover stuff.
Okay.
Just trying to find some time to do all of that stuff, man, and also, breathe at the end of the day.
There you go, man. There you go, man. But just like I said, man, trust me, it's definitely a pleasure, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing this with you real soon because you and I have another topic that we have discussed, and we're going to be bringing it to you. Not a matter of if, but more like when. So definitely stay tuned, folks, to this channel. But until the next time, fine folks, for Mark Jenkins, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.